Hello everybody, welcome to today's episode of my networking show. So today's topic, my friend on LinkedIn, Jake Green, asked me a question. Adam, what's a domain controller? Can you tell me what a domain controller is? Well, the first thing I started thinking of is we need them, period, right? Because without a domain controller, we don't have any services on our network. Any company that I've ever worked for has a domain controller. And the domain controller is like the central brain of the network. If you want to provide services, the domain controller is like the glue that glues all those services together. You know, it has what's called DNS, resolving domain names to IP addresses. It's got what's called Active Directory. That's the biggest one, the Active Directory domain services and the users and computers. You know, that's where all of the information is about a user. The username, the password, his email address, his employee ID, what groups he's under, the group policies. And you know, I used to work for an airline, and sometimes we'd have new hires come in, new contractors. We'd have to deploy over 100 users in a day. So now doing this one by one could be a bit tedious, and that would take forever. So, but with the domain controller, there's some things called roles and features. So if you're in a Windows 2016 server, you can go into the server manager, open up new rules and features, install something called RSAT tools. Now this allows for us network or system engineers to open up PowerShell and to write a PowerShell script with an Excel CSV file. Now here we're basically doing is, by the way, I can make a video of this following up because I know listening to this can be confusing, but I'll make a follow-up video of how to do this on the computer. Just bear with me. So in this PowerShell script, you would put in the user's name, the username, the email address, and now depending on what department they're under, if they're under accounting or engineering or HR, they all have different group policies or different user groups or mailboxes, organization units that they're a part of. So you can mirror them to somebody else in one of those departments and then put in a big script through an Excel spreadsheet to deploy over 100 users at once. We can do this when we're deleting users too. You know, sometimes we get contractors in bulk. They'll be there for 3 months doing a project. At the end of the 3 months, we can delete them all. Maybe there's 50 of them working on a project, and we just get rid of them all. That sounds awful, getting rid of them all. Just ending their contract, then we can go through the script to remove all their users from Active Directory again. So now, I used to work for another company where we would order in over 100 laptops at once. So 100 or 120 new laptops. You know, we had a big head office with about 6 floors downtown Calgary. And you know, in order to get these laptops set up, brand new, they didn't have Windows 10 on them right away. So, you know, I could have gone into each and every one individually to install Windows 10. Instead, from a Windows Server 2016 or 2012, whichever version you're using, a domain controller, or just a read-only domain controller, which is a lesser version, you can use what's called Windows Deployment Services. That's a role you can install in one of those controllers. And with that, you can mount an ISO image for Windows 10, and then you go ahead and connect all of those laptops to a switch, like a Catalyst 4500E. Those have a lot of ports on them, so you can connect them all with an Ethernet RJ45 connector. Then you go back on your domain controller, run the Windows deployment services, and you can install Windows 10 in one click of a button just from there, after you set it up, of course. That way you can install Windows 10 on as many services and many laptops as you want with no problems. Another thing that comes to my mind when I think about domain controllers is the global catalog. The global catalog is this broad index where you can look up things like printers, file servers, you know, devices, usernames, emails, that kind of thing. And it's just a big compilation of information that the domain controller knows about, keeps a catalog about, so that you can look it up quickly. And now, this is everything that the global catalog knows about a forest. We're out here in the forest, and that's another term that comes to mind when we're talking about domain controllers. So what is a forest? So a forest is, you know, a hierarchical organization group, you know, folders within subfolders, you know, different branches. You know, a forest is like the domain, and then we have trees, which is like containers in it, and then we have the branches, which is the subfolders and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And the next thing, we got 5 FSMO roles on a domain controller. Now I'm going to go over each of them and why they're important and what kind of projects we can be using if we know how to work around with these roles. So the first role is the schema master. The schema master contains everything we talked about, you know, the usernames, the attributes, you know, email addresses, phone numbers, employee IDs. That's all under the schema master. The second one is the domain name master, making sure there isn't another domain controller in our forest that has the same name as this domain controller. Another one is the RID master, you know, the relative ID. So that's where the security IDs are stored, you know, the object policy groups and the security IDs. The PDC emulator, that's where the authentication happens. You know, when you go to work, or maybe you're a student, you go to the college, you log into one of the computers, you put in your username and password. That goes more than likely goes through the domain's controller. That's where the authentication happens to let you onto that computer. Now the 5th role of a domain controller is the infrastructure master. What?
You said 5th and then you had 4 fingers up.
I'll keep that in the video. The 5th one. So the 5th one is what connects all the dots between the forests. So then, you know, if you have more than one forest, the infrastructure master is what connects the dots between those. So now that we know all the 5 roles, imagine you're working in a company that's running a 2012 Windows server, but it's 2020, so it's time for an update, right? But a lot of companies, if you want to update the server, they think, you know, you got to turn it off, do the updates, you know, restart it. That's company downtime that they can't afford. So now what you can do is install a 2019 domain controller, you know, just a backup domain controller and another server. Then you can migrate over all those 5 FSMO roles, the masters, to the read-only domain, the backup domain controller, and then migrate over the global catalog as well. And just like that, if you do that migration right, you can upgrade your server from a 2012 to a 2019 with 0 downtime. And you know, that's great for business. That's great for the longevity of your company, because now you're up to date with the updates. It's more secure. So last topic, I should have thrown this in earlier on, is talking more about group policies. I mentioned it a bit earlier, but just to go more into depth on what a group policy is. So imagine you just signed into a computer at your college, first time, or at your work, first time. It already has a wallpaper, it already has Google Chrome installed, but you never set that up. And more than likely, the system admin or the desktop support guy, he didn't install that either. He didn't go into each and every computer to install those things. What happened was the domain controller has group policies that they can assign to user groups. So when they create you as a user, as a new hire, they assign you to those groups, and the domain controller automatically installs Google Chrome for you. It automatically puts you into all these shared mailboxes with Outlook. Automatically, it sets your wallpaper. You know, it could put in filters too. You know, if you're using too much memory, if you're using too much storage, you know, group policies can put in little filters to manage that as well. So the very last point I want to bring up about domain controllers is they oftentimes work alongside with mail servers, you know, POP and IMAP. We don't use POP anymore, but a big one is Microsoft Exchange. So, you know, Microsoft Exchange is where you can manage and connect different distribution groups, distribution lists, mailboxes, shared mailboxes for Outlooks, you know, making sure that the users in different groups can be connected to those different mailboxes, and, you know, everything to do with mailboxes and the synchronizing and stuff like that. But as you probably know, Microsoft Exchange is becoming a thing of the past. We're migrating that over to the Azure cloud. So now a lot of companies have a department called Modern Workplace. You know, you got your cloud engineers and stuff, DevOps. They're working on moving Exchange to the cloud. A lot of companies are already done this. A lot of companies haven't started yet, but it's becoming relevant more and more. So that's all I wanted to talk about domain controllers today. I'm sure I forgot about a lot of things because this is a huge topic. There's so much to talk about with domain controllers, but I'm going to do some follow-up videos with more of the technical stuff. As I mentioned earlier, that PowerShell lab, I can make a lab for that so you can see all the PowerShell commands to mass create users, to mass deploy Windows servers and stuff like that. So, you know, automation is a great thing. If you don't know PowerShell, you should start today. I'll put some links in the description below to free guides. There's awesome books online. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time.